Here's something that will bother you once you see it. The people you most want approval from, the ones whose opinion truly matters, whose praise you genuinely feel, are almost always the ones who aren't trying to give it. Think about the last compliment you received that truly meant something. The one you still remember. The one that didn't feel like politeness or performance. I'd bet the person who said it isn't typically the type to say things like that. I'd bet they aren't warm or generally indiscriminate in their praise. I'd bet that when they told you they respected you or that you did something well, it hit differently, because you knew. On some level, they didn't have to say it. They weren't managing your feelings. They weren't softening anything. They just meant it. That's not a coincidence. The approval of someone who doesn't need to give it is worth more than anything an approval seeker ever said about you. Not because they're cold, but because they're free. This video is about that freedom. Why it's rare, why it draws people in, and why most people, when they encounter it, feel something that sits between admiration and discomfort, and can't quite name it. By the end, you'll be able to name it. And you'll understand something about yourself that has been quietly running in the background for a long time. Let's start with the thing most videos on this topic overlook entirely. When you meet someone who doesn't need your approval, who speaks without softening, decides without checking, exists without performing, something specific happens inside you. Two things, actually, and they pull in opposite directions. The first is attraction. You want to be near them. You find yourself watching them. You remember what they say. There's a gravity to them that you didn't agree to, and can't fully explain. The second is resistance. A low irritation, maybe. A quiet voice that says they think they're better than everyone, or they're just cold, or they don't care about anyone. Sometimes it comes out as criticism. Sometimes just a vague discomfort you can't quite identify. Here's what's really happening in both cases. They're a mirror. When someone is truly settled, not pretending confidence, not managing your reaction, just being there, steady and unconcerned with your opinion, their calm highlights your own unease. You suddenly see how much you're checking, adjusting, and controlling your behavior based on others' judgments, and that feels uncomfortable, not because they did anything wrong, because you saw something you hadn't noticed before. The attraction is your desire for that kind of freedom. The resistance is your reluctance to face it. Both reactions, admiration and discomfort, come from the same reflection. When someone calls a person like this arrogant, dismissive, or cold, they're often not wrong that it feels that way. They're wrong about where that feeling comes from. The discomfort isn't caused by the other person. It's caused by the mirror. This matters because the real question isn't what's their deal. The real question is, why does their indifference to my approval affect me so much? Asking this seriously is where everything in this video lives. Now, let's discuss what approval seeking actually conveys to those around you, beyond your intentions. It reveals a deeper message at the level of social instinct, which operates faster than conscious thought. When you seek someone's approval, you're implicitly telling them that their judgment matters more than your own. You're outsourcing your self-assessment. The person receiving that signal doesn't judge you consciously. Their brain performs a quick assessment. Does this person know who they are? Are they stable? Can I trust their actions? When the answer is uncertain, like when someone's confidence hinges on your nod, their brain perceives a low-level alarm. It's not cruelty or contempt, but alertness. Someone who can't stand on their own without validation becomes, subtly, your responsibility. Psychologists call this process one form of emotional contagion, absorbing the emotional states of others through microsignals such as tone, posture, and attention. When insecurity dominates these signals, it influences us, making us less stable. We naturally distance ourselves from what destabilizes us, not intentionally, but gradually. That's why approval seekers often feel confused about why they are lonely despite their agreeableness, carefulness, and efforts to make others comfortable. They believe they're being generous, and in a way they are. But they also carry a silent question into every room. Do you like me? Am I okay? Is this right? And those around them feel the weight of that question. They sense they are being asked to bear something. Over time, many choose to step away. You don't have to be disliked to feel lonely. You can be endlessly accommodating and still find yourself alone, with a self you don't recognize, surrounded by people who enjoy a performance, but have never truly met the person behind it. Here is what frustrates people when they first hear it, and frustrates them even more once they realize it's true. When you stop needing approval, people give it to you more freely, more genuinely, and in a way that actually hits home. That's the paradox at the core of all this. And I want to be precise about why, because there are two versions of this insight, and only one is genuine. The fake version is strategic. Pretend not to care what people think, and they will be drawn to you. That's what much of the content in this space actually sells. Perform indifference. Cultivate detachment as a social tactic. Use groundedness as bait. This doesn't work, and the reason it fails is the same reason the real thing does. People feel the difference, not always consciously, but reliably. The person showing approval independence is still checking the room. They've just flipped the focus. Instead of checking if you like them, they check if you're impressed by how much they don't care. The need is the same. The costume is different. The real version isn't a strategy. It's a state. It comes from someone who, through some mix of failure, reflection, genuine self-examination, and practice tolerating discomfort, has built a relationship with themselves that doesn't require external validation. And when you're around that person, three things happen all at once. First, you can exhale. Someone who doesn't need you to manage their feelings means you don't have to perform. You can be direct, disagree, or stay quiet. The social toll you usually pay, the low-level energy spent monitoring whether people are okay, whether you've said the wrong thing, or whether the mood has shifted, that toll vanishes. And the relief feels physical. Second, scarcity. Most people, to some degree, operate based on others' feedback. This began in childhood, literally. Approval from caregivers was tied to their survival. The wiring runs deep. So, an adult who has truly loosened it, not suppressed, but loosened, is rare. And the human brain reacts to unusual things as if they're especially valuable. It can't help itself. Third, and most important, the approval they do give you means a lot. When someone who flatters everyone calls you brilliant, you might feel nothing. But when someone says exactly what they think, who doesn't perform warmth or soften their feedback, when that person says they respect you, you feel it in your chest. Because you know they're not managing you. You know it's genuine. You find yourself wanting the opinion of the one person who isn't trying to give it. Before we move forward, let's clarify what approval independence actually looks like in behavior. This idea is often misunderstood in two main ways. The first is arrogance. Arrogance isn't approval independence. It's approval seeking with a different focus. An arrogant person still needs validation. They've just shifted from needing to be liked to needing to seem impressive. They are still checking, still adjusting. The reaction they want has changed, but the act of seeking approval hasn't. The second misunderstanding is coldness. An approval-independent person isn't indifferent to others. They're not pretending to be detached. They simply don't require others' approval to function. In practice, this appears quieter than people expect. They don't over-explain their decisions. They make their choices, communicate clearly, and move on without narrating their reasoning in a way that asks, "Is that okay?" They don't soften their opinions prematurely. They don't trail every sentence with, "But maybe I'm wrong," as a safeguard against disapproval. They can accept a compliment without deflecting it. They can sit quietly without filling the space with performance. They can stand firm on a position when faced with pushback, not rigidly or defensively, but steadily and genuinely update when presented with a better argument, not just because of social pressure to yield. The key trait is that their behavior remains consistent regardless of who is watching. This consistency is perceived as reliability by others, predictable in the right sense. You know what you're dealing with. In a social landscape full of people constantly adapting to fit various situations, someone who remains unchanged stands out, like a fixed star. Everything else is moving, they are not. Most people don't realize they're approval-seeking, because they've been doing it so long it just feels like thinking. They don't express their true thoughts in meetings. Instead, they say the version they believe will be well received. This happens so often that the calculation occurs before the thought fully forms. They edit themselves before deciding what they truly believe. They don't pursue opportunities that genuinely excite them. Instead, they wait until they've gathered enough ambient approval from those around them to feel it's okay to want it. They say start and stop based on a constant background process, constantly asking, "What's the response going to be?" Each time, they send themselves the same message: "My true self isn't safe to show." Over the years, this message has built into a structure. They stop knowing their real thoughts because they've spent so long producing what others want to hear, their true wants, beliefs, and feelings get buried under layers of social calculation, cutting them off from their authentic self. Here's the brutal irony. The more they seek approval, the less they get of the version that truly matters. People can only approve of the performance, and knowing it's just a performance, their approval doesn't truly land. It slips off and leaves nothing behind. So they chase more validation, reassurance, and adjustment to each new situation. But none of it satisfies because it's feeding a hunger with something that isn't real nourishment. What they built was a version of themselves meant to be loved, but what they received was love for something that isn't truly them. This isn't a small problem. It's a fundamental flaw in the entire project of their life. And most people miss a key detail. Others feel it too. They sense, often without naming it, that they're interacting with a version crafted for someone else's benefit. There's a faint emptiness to it, a performance quality, which creates in others a loneliness that mirrors yours, because they're trying to connect with someone who isn't fully present. I'm not going to give you a list of tips because tips don't build this. What builds it is a specific shift in how you relate to three things: your self-assessment, disapproval, and outcomes. Let me address each one seriously. Self-assessment. Approval seekers often lack a genuine relationship with their own evaluation of themselves. Not because they're stupid, but because they outsourced that function early on, and it atrophied. The real question, what do I actually think of myself and my work in private, apart from others' reflections, has rarely been seriously considered. This is the starting point. Not affirmations or confidence exercises. A true, uncomfortable, honest audit. What are your strengths? What are your limitations? Can you hold both without inflating or collapsing? The person who can do that has a foundation that isn't dependent on others' opinions, no matter the weather. Disapproval tolerance. This is a skill, almost a physical skill. And the only way to build it is through exposure. Not reckless exposure, not deliberately provoking others to toughen up. Calibrated exposure. Say the real thing in low-stakes situations. Stay present as responses come in. Don't pre-apologize or retract before they respond. Stand firm and observe what happens. Most of the time, the catastrophe you feared doesn't happen. Sometimes people disagree, push back, or walk away. And you survive every time. The more you survive disapproval, the more accurate your threat model becomes. You stop perceiving it as lethal because you have evidence that it isn't. Outcome orientation. Approval seekers are reactive. They constantly ask, how is this landing? Independent thinkers focus on results. They ask, is this truly working? This shift takes time and happens through consistently evaluating your decisions based on actual results, not immediate reactions. Reactions can be manufactured. Outcomes cannot. The more you focus on the outcomes, the less influence reactions have. One more note less obvious. Be cautious about who gets access to the early stages of your ideas. One subtle form of approval seeking is sharing your ideas, plans, and decisions before they're fully formed, and then taking others' reactions as permission to proceed. You test your identity with anyone willing to engage. Approval-independent people develop privately and then share. They don't expose the unfinished work to judgment before deciding what they think. This isn't secrecy. It's self-respect in practice. A note on context. Some degree of approval seeking makes sense. Job interviews, early relationship efforts, navigating real power imbalances. The aim isn't to eliminate all concern about others' perceptions. It's to distinguish between the automatic, obsessive version and the deliberate, contextual one. One is a reflex you've never examined. The other is a tool you use when it's useful and put down when it's not. The key difference is agency. When people meet someone who doesn't seek their approval, they often react in one of two ways. They chase validation, trying harder, performing better, and making more efforts to get the person to approve them. They show up more, disclose more, and create a false sense of depth. But none of this works not because the other person is unkind, but because their magnetic quality comes from not needing approval at all. The chase only fuels a cycle that can't be sustained. Alternatively, they attack. They become arrogant, cold, and believe they are superior. Sometimes, there is a real observation behind this. Occasional dismissiveness is genuine, but more often, the attack is a defense disguised as criticism. It's easier to blame the mirror for being broken than to face what it shows. Both chasing and attacking avoid answering the deeper question. The chase suggests, if I just get their approval, I won't have to question why I need it so badly. The attack implies, if I see them as truly contemptible, I don't have to feel vulnerable to what I've seen. Neither approach leads anywhere. The only helpful question is the one beneath both behaviors. Why does this person's independence affect me so deeply? What does their ability not need approval reveal about my own needs? Here's what I want you to sit with. Not a tip, not an action item, just a question. And try to let it be a real question, not a rhetorical one. How much of what you said today was actually what you thought? Not in high-stakes conversations where tactics matter and you choose your words carefully, but in ordinary ones. The automatic, softened opinions before they're fully formed. The things you held back before they were fully thought through. Pre-rejected based on imagined reactions you wanted to avoid. How much of who you are has quietly been edited out, not through a conscious decision, but through a habitual process so automatic that you stop noticing it. The people you admire, those who walk into rooms confidently, speak honestly, hold their positions authentically, move freely without waiting for permission, didn't get there through tips. They arrived by sitting with that question long enough to hear the real answer, and then acting in accordance with it. That's the whole process. If this resonates with something you can't quite name, subscribe. This is the kind of conversation we revisit here each week, exploring a little further each time. I'll see you there.